Let's go ahead and now take a look at the muscles of the upper extremity. Again, we are viewing the lateral chest, shoulder, and arm here. We are going to start out by looking at the biceps brachii muscle. Biceps brachii muscle is an anterior muscle of the upper arm. We see it highlighted here in purple. Again, we're going to remove the highlight so that we can identify very clearly the biceps brachii muscle. The next muscle in your word list to identify is the triceps brachii muscle. We're still going to be looking in the shoulder arm region, but we need a posterior view to be able to see this muscle. So here we see a posterior view, and we're going to highlight the triceps brachii muscle. So again, a large posterior muscle, skeletal muscle of the upper arm. We see it here in purple. We'll go ahead and remove the purple highlight so we can see the triceps brachii muscle. This muscle, someone who has very well-defined musculature, has kind of this horseshoe-shaped appearance to it. The next muscle to identify is called the brachialis. The brachialis is an anterior upper arm muscle, so we have to go ahead and move around to the front. The brachialis muscle is a very broad muscle that lies underneath the biceps brachii muscle. Here we see the brachialis. The biceps brachii muscle has been removed. Let's go ahead and remove the highlight here so we can see this broad brachialis muscle here. Again, the biceps brachii muscle has been removed so that we can see underneath our brachialis muscle. If we go back and take a look at the biceps brachii, or we put the biceps brachii muscle back on, here we see colored in purple the biceps brachii, and then again, lying right underneath this biceps brachii is the brachialis. So let's go ahead and remove the biceps brachii again so that we can see that brachialis underneath. The next muscle to identify are the flexors of the wrist. So let's go ahead and take a look at the wrist flexors. In an effort to do that, we need to move down to the forearm hand region. You can see that the forearm and the hand region, we are looking at this from an anterior view because we can see the palmar surface of the hand. We can see here this muscle here and this set of muscles that's on the anterior, in the anterior compartment of the forearm are known as the wrist flexors. They are known as the wrist flexors. They are going to flex the wrist. The next muscle to identify are the wrist extensors, and in an effort to do that, we're going to have to go ahead and move to a posterior view. We know this is a posterior view because we see the back of the dorsum of the hand. The wrist extensors are going to be on the posterior aspect of the forearm. Okay, so here this group of muscles, I know this one is highlighted purple. I'm going to actually remove the highlight here. There's a group of posterior forearm muscles that all act to extend the wrist. So this group that I'm highlighting here, I'm moving my cursor around, we're going to call these the wrist extensors, whereas on the other side, okay, this group that we see here, I'm going to remove the highlight. This group that we see here on the anterior surface of the forearm, these are going to be our wrist flexors. The next muscle to identify is called the brachioradialis. And the brachioradialis is a nice muscular landmark because what it does is it separates the flexor group of the wrist. So again, anterior surface of the forearm, all these muscles are going to be the flexors of the wrist. We see the brachioradialis right here, and this muscle is going to separate the flexor group of the wrists from the extensor group of the wrists. I'll go ahead and highlight this muscle so that we can see it. It's a very long muscle. It has attachment points up on the humerus, the bone of the upper arm bone, and it comes down and attaches down past the wrist. So this is our brachioradialis, which is going to separate this wrist flexor group from the wrist extensor group. So what I'll do is I'll move posteriorly. We'll see a posterior view of the brachioradialis. So here's the brachioradialis, and again, this would be our wrist extensor group. The next muscle to identify is the infraspinatus, and the infraspinatus, we're going to need to come up and look at the shoulder region, and we're going to need a posterior view. You took your skeletal system practical not too long ago, so you should have learned the infraspinous fossa on the scapula. There is a muscle that is going to sit in that infraspinous fossa, and it's called the infraspinatus. Here, highlighted in purple, we see the infraspinatus. This here would be the spine of the scapula. Just below it is our infraspinous fossa. Sitting in that fossa is the infraspinatus muscle. I'm going to remove that purple highlight so that you can see the musculature very clearly. I'm going to now show you the deltoid muscle. So the deltoid muscle is a large superficial muscle of the shoulder, a prime mover of the shoulder. We see that here. It's got this kind of triangular shaped appearance to it. We see a posterior view of the deltoid. We can also see that deltoid from an anterior view as well, and we see it anteriorly as well. I'm going to go ahead and remove that purple highlight so we can make out the musculature and the color of the fiber, or the direction the fibers run. The final muscle to identify is the supraspinatus muscle. The supraspinatus muscle is a clinically relevant muscle for the reason that it is the most commonly torn muscle of the rotator cuff. So there are 4 muscles that make up the rotator cuff group, and the most commonly torn is the supraspinatus muscle. We can see the supraspinatus muscle highlighted here in purple. Again, it's going to lie in the supraspinous fossa of the scapula. Here we see the spine of the scapula. Just above it, this depression is the supraspinous fossa. Lying in it is the supraspinatus muscle. Go ahead and remove that highlight so you can view the supraspinatus muscle in its entirety.